Welcome to Chapter 13. We will be discussing the spinal cord and the spinal nerves extending from. So we will take a look at some anatomical features, a little more understanding about how the nervous system helps maintain homeostasis. We will look at a few spinal reflexes. Okay, so functions of the spinal cord in general, we will process reflexes, integrate excitatory and inhibitory postsynaptic potentials, and conduct sensory impulses to and from the brain. Sensory to the brain, motor from the brain. Okay, the spinal cord has a few layers of protection. First one would be bone. So the spinal cord moves through the vertebral column through the vertebral foramen of each vertebra. Then connective tissue, known as meninges, will also be lining the spinal cord. We'll see 3 different layers. And then cerebral spinal fluid for cushioning as well as acting as a form of blood, if you will. So the meninges, the most outer layer, will be the dura mater, or tough mother. So it's the tough outer layer seen here. And then arachnoid mater, this is going to be the second layer. And then you can see these denticulate ligaments. They kind of form a little bit of a web-like structure, hence arachnoid mater. And then pia mater, or delicate mother. So this meninge will adhere directly to the spinal cord. So here's a look anatomically at all of those structures. So dura, arachnoid, and pia. So between the arachnoid mater and pia mater, we have the subarachnoid space. This is where we see the cerebral spinal fluid. This will carry dissolved gases, nutrients, and waste to help maintain and regulate the spinal cord. So clinically, a lumbar puncture or spinal tap withdraws cerebral spinal fluid, and we'll do this below the level of L2, and we'll see why that is so to help avoid spinal cord damage. We briefly spoke about white versus gray matter in the last chapter. So in the spinal cord, white matter is more superficial. It is more on the peripheral edges of the spinal cord. We contain myelinated and some unmyelinated axons. Gray matter, on the other hand, this is going to have kind of an butterfly or H shape depending on where we are in the spinal cord. And this will contain cell bodies of neurons, neuroglia, and unmyelinated axons. So we'll see some projections known as gray horns. Here is a look at the spinal cord anatomically. We start off at the superior end at the base of the skull. So we exit the foramen magnum at the level just above C1. So the foramen magnum is what separates the spinal cord from the medulla oblongata, which we will discuss next chapter. And the cord will extend to L1, L2 area, and the end of the cord is known as the conus medullaris. From there, what extends down into the sacrum are going to be nerve roots. So there is no actual solid cord entering the sacrum, but just nerve roots. This group of nerve roots are known as the cauda equina, or horse tail. From there, anchoring the spinal cord will be the meninges, mostly the pia mater, anchoring on the coccyx. This is known as the filum terminale. So here's another look. Kind of shows the sections of cord. So blue cervical, orange, thoracic. And then we get a little bit of green for the lumbar, and then sacrum would be purple. But here you can see either butterfly or H-shaped gray matter within the cord as well. This is due to the axons taking up a certain amount of space, cell bodies in the gray matter taking up a certain amount of space. As you can see in the lumbar region, where a lot of those nerve roots are extending from, we have a lot of cell bodies from which they will extend because it is shorter. Okay, so here's it all written out. Conus medullaris, phylum terminale cauda. And then we have spinal nerves. We'll take a look at a few of them. 31 pair. So 8 from cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral, and 1 coccygeal. Okay, a nerve root is going to be a bundle of axons that connect each spinal nerve to the spinal cord with rootlets. Okay, so we have 2 roots, a posterior and anterior root for that nerve. And then the posterior root will contain sensory neurons. Do make note of that. Anterior root will contain motor neurons. So sensory is going to be in the front of sensory will be in the posterior of the cord, and then motor output will be from the front of the cord. Okay, so on that posterior root we have a ganglia, the posterior root ganglia. This is where we will find cell bodies from those sensory neurons. Okay, so looking at a cross section of cord here, here is that posterior root ganglia. This is what helps you note this is the posterior side of the cord. Okay, so that leaves the anterior side for motor output. Okay, so motor is moving out, sensory is moving in through the posterior side of the cord. And here, this purple neuron is considered an interneuron. This is going to be where we see reflexes taking place. Within the gray matter, we have a posterior gray horn, anterior gray horn, and a lateral gray horn. The posterior gray horn will be cell bodies and axons of interneurons for sensory. So axons of sensory neurons. Anterior gray horn, clusters of cell bodies of somatic motor neurons. Again, motor. Lateral gray horn will be autonomic motor neurons. So this is one thing that we didn't see a minute ago, but a lateral gray horn will be seen only in the thoracic and lumbar portions of the spinal cord. This is where we see the sympathetic nervous system. White columns will contain sensory and motor tracts that extend from or to the brain. So here we can take a quick look. This is going to be a white column, the posterior white column. So this is going to be tracts moving to and from the brain. Mostly to, because it is sensory. Here is the posterior gray horn. Again, sensory input. Here we actually see a lateral gray horn. Again, autonomic nervous system there. Motor output. And then we have anterior gray horn for somatic motor output. And then in the spinal cord, we actually have a central canal for cerebrospinal fluid to maintain health of that cord. And then gray commissure is just the connection between the left and right halves of the spinal cord. All right. So 2 branches of spinal nerves. We have, this is kind of a repeat slide, if you will. A ventral root or anterior root is going to contain motor neurons. Dorsal root or posterior root will contain sensory neurons. Dorsal root ganglia, cell bodies of sensory neurons. And nuclei are going to be groups of cell bodies in the CNS, whether it be motor or sensory. So we have ganglia in the peripheral nervous system and nuclei in the central nervous system for groups of cell bodies.